Hello.
Hello. How are you this morning?
I'm fine. How are you? Nice weather, huh?
I know, right? Typical Idaho.
Yes.
Am I over here?
Let's see. Where did I? There you are. There you are.
So, I don't know if you noticed, but I have to confess, I messed up on those posters.
You did?
I did.
I didn't notice.
Uh,
What did you do?
well, the first thing was I didn't meet all the requirements, I guess. So, ISU's logo's not on there.
Oh.
Second thing is it's spell checked me on Talia's name, so that's spelled wrong. And then I used the German spelling for Carl Steinitz instead of the English spelling, and I got chastised for that too. So I'm reprinting them if you want a different one.
Well, if you have an extra one, I'll take it.
Okay.
Hello.
One of them. Oh,
Is this fun?
huh?
Is this fun?
Yeah.
Like an Easter egg hunt.
Oh.
Everybody use the ice scraper this morning? Isn't that a treat? Beautiful though. Trees.
It's supposed to be April, not January.
is your scene?
By the way, the main level choir library is now fully inventoried as of last week. Now I just have to do that stuff. And the basics.
Guest list keeps increasing.
It was like 78 degrees on Sunday. Yeah, I couldn't believe it was snow this morning because like when I was hearing it this morning, I thought it was raining. Yeah. So I walked out and I was like, what the heck? Yeah.
Okay, well, let's begin. And sorry about last week. It was a rough one. So we obviously lost a couple of classes. And so yet again, there's a little bit of a change up in what we're going to be doing. One of the things that, as I was thinking through what you need to know, in my opinion, before you go out, whether you do your student teaching or you're going out, hey, you're right there in front of me. Keep an eye on you. Are basically what we're going to be doing in the last 6 classes. And so rather than unfortunately from the standpoint where typically you might get to experience at least a little bit of it, you're going to have to experience it now as the choir. And so I'm going to be doing a lot of leading in terms of rehearsal techniques. We're going to talk about some things, but also I want to take you through some processes as you'll need to encounter them as a teacher. So and we'll be using the 3 pieces that I gave you. So hold on to those because I'll be using those in my own rehearsal with you. Which leads me to the next thing, and that is, and I know that there's some of you that are online, etc. And I know that there's 1 or 2 of you that have talked about Thursday needing to be online. You've got a dress rehearsal or something for your recital, like we're kind of stacked around here with scheduling. If that occurs, I will continue to video the classes and you can catch up on those. However, I'm going to strongly suggest that you're in class because you're not going to pick up the experiential stuff unless you're here physically. Obviously, if you can't be here, you can't be here. But and you can make reference to the videos that we have. But now it's really pretty much up to you. What you can take in when you're here in class is going to be really the core of what you'll take from the class. So with many apologies about all of those circumstances, I still am pretty confident that we'll have a good experience and discussion about what you'll need to do as a choral music educator. So you've got your 3 pieces. You don't need to take them out. But way before that ever happens, we do our choral music evaluation, or we go into the online and we peruse music and we decide, okay, at the beginning of the year, this is what I think I'm going to have. And so, lo and behold, from our publisher comes a stack of music. And this is what Brian was just talking about. Brian is the choral librarian here at ISU. And when I taught public school, I was the choral librarian at Pullman High School. And you will be the choral librarian at, wherever you are. And maybe after a while, you'll have a student helper or something like this is all stuff that I did myself when I was teaching public school, and with acknowledgments that whether you own, whether you get Shoshone Love Song, or you get the Alleluia, or you get Song of the Sea, those three pieces, they will be ordered from sheetmusic.com, or they will be ordered from J.W. Pepper or Lux Music or any other of those places. And they'll be shipped to you in some fashion. If you are fortunate enough to be in a school district where your students have readers, then you'll be uploading PDF files, and they'll be able to, hold their reader, and that's the way things are going. So, in fact, you'll see if you Google YouTube much and you look at some professional choirs have gone entirely to that, like Voces 8. They use readers on their music stands, and some other groups. So this is still the common standard, but it's going that other direction, I think, because it's going to eventually be cheap enough that the readers will not be any more expensive than what your budget would have been spent on for a given academic year. So that all being said, we've ordered our music, it comes in, and what do you, Veronica, or Nick, or Sean, or any of you do? You are stuck with all this music, and you then need to process it. You need to store it. And this is all the stuff that is not, talked about. Where do I get this? How do I do this? It's not in your choral music textbook. But it is like the chairs that you're sitting in, and I'm not talking about the desks, but these, in our age of COVID, we're compromised in every way. But those black posture chairs are going to be something like what you have, and that is equipment that comes from where? Wenger, W-E-N-G-E-R. Risers come from Wenger. Shells come from Wenger. There are other companies, but that's the biggest company out there. And they make state-of-the-art for bands, choirs, orchestras. Shells are going to be used by all the music ensembles. Chairs are going to be used by all the music ensembles. Stands at one time or another will be used by all the music ensembles. And so that's a supplier you need to know about, WENGER.com. And another supplier that we need to know about is Gamble Music. Gamble Music for choral music storage. And Gamble Music is still in existence, and it is probably, 80 or 100-year-old business. But it's one of the biggies, like Wenger. And so you can see all sizes of choral storage boxes. Here's a little 1-inch, 2-inch, 3-inch, and here's the oversized one. There's a 4-inch size as well. And depending upon how many copies you buy of how thick your music is, this is what you would choose to store it in. So I take my arrangement of America the Beautiful, and I have decided, as you will have to decide, what is your storage holding thing for every single one of these kits? Is it going to be a 3-hole punch like this? Is it going to be a 2-hole punch? Is it not going to be punched? Is it going to be one of those peachy type folders? Or how are your students going to hold their music, and how are they going to deal with it? So once you make that decision, and it's a punch situation, then you have either a 3-hole punch or 2-hole punch, and these can be slid around to, you know that. This is not the flashy part of the program, but it is how you will survive. And so why do you do all this? Because this is now owned by your school district. This now belongs to the school, not the student. And so in some way, shape, or form, you're probably going to have, and there are much more sophisticated ways of doing it than this, but this is the old-fashioned way, an ink stamp that has a rubber stamp that has property of Idaho State University Choral Department, and you stamp every single one of them, and then you free-hole punch every single one of them. And this process might take place in the week or so before school, and then what I used to do is I used to go through this with what Brian does here. I go through this with every single folder, and I would set it up that way. So how many different pieces like this? Now, some of the pieces you're going to have stored in your storage area. And believe me, you would reuse some of them from year to year. And so everybody's folder is going to be a combination of things you may have pulled out of your choral library or brand new music. And that's going to make up your program. And then you probably only have in each of these folders that concert cycle. So that means your first October concert, that's the music they get. You would probably do the same process for some sight reading material or other extra things, rules, we do this in choir, blah, 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 calendar, that sort of thing. So we set all of that up, and then, as you see, there's one storage example right behind Marcus, state of the art, 1957. That's a joke, because that was probably built way back. And those inserted cabinets, those inserted slots, I had put in by one of the maintenance guys. He built those because there was nothing in there but flat. So we decided to add that many folder holders. Then you have, back here's the ISU Children's Choir version, and that is a piece of furniture, essentially, that stores folders flat. So those are the two main kinds of storage devices. Guess what? WENGER.com. That's where you can buy one of those. And Gamble Music, and Lux Music, and all these other big places have equipment and the ability to have something like that, which is a cart, essentially. It is rollable. And there's one inside the Fine Arts, or in Gorson Hall, because that is what Ms. Lane used to use with the women's choir. So in there is a black version of that, a newer version of that, kind of plastic and plywood, and it rolls, and she could roll it around the room and put it wherever. So this is all stuff that we do before you have a single student in your room. And so then, what you probably will also do is after you have stamped, punched, before you put it in the folder, you'll number it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 60, or however many there are. And why would you do that besides keeping track of it, of how many copies you have?
Because you're probably going to be assigning students a binder number, so this way you know who lost it if it gets lost.
Spoken like a true librarian. Yes, you're going to make the assignments to your students. Nick is number 7 this semester, and Brandon's number 2, and so on and so forth. Whether you assign them according to last name, alphabetically, or however that works out, that all is done with the rosters that you receive just before everybody shows up. Then, the first day of school, or the first official class day, where you're going to have all 6 of your preps. Your students come in here. What have you done? You have already poured over the rosters. You know exactly who's in your choir. And you know, because you have, readout sheets or on your computer or whatever it is, maybe you've taken the time to put their names on every chair. And so when they come into the classroom, there's my name, Sean, Faith, even Haley. And so they come in and you you have already established, I think, what are some things that, and I know everybody was dealing with April snow showers today, and like, gosh, I'm sick of this. I know you were there. But if it was the beginning of your school year, and you came in, and you see your name on the chair, what goes through your head? You say, uh-oh. Hopefully that's not it. What are some things?
Order and organization.
Yeah, things are ordered, that there's an organization.
I feel like that's important.
Yeah, and I think that's a biggie. That you feel like, wow, this person who went to the trouble of setting this up knows who I am. Uh-huh.
Having a name that's commonly misspelled and then seeing it spelled correctly and then given like a place where I can sit, it's nice. It means that somebody took extra time to make sure that they were spelling my name the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I feel that way too when I go into a room or a meeting or something, there's a little placard with my name on it. It's like, wow, this is kind of cool. But it also, what does it do for you if you were the one that set this up? What's it easily done?
Helps you begin to learn their names.
Helps you begin, absolutely. You're gonna do every kind of thing that you can in the first couple of days to learn all of the names of and this isn't the only class. You've got 5 other classes. So playing with seating charts, putting the names with those people. Okay, I know that Deanna's sitting back there, so that's Deanna. Okay, I know who she is now. And then maybe I change it the next time that people come in, and that can be as much for me as it is for them. So that just establishes maybe room discipline. It establishes that, okay, when your students now come in the next time, don't you think there's going to be some expectations? Like, oh, I'm going to look around next time and kind of figure out what's going to happen. And that can happen with not just seating, but that can happen with other kinds of, I guess, assignments that you give them for the next day or something like that. It can happen with where that music holder is placed. If it's on wheels like that, maybe you're going to move it around every so often and put it over here. The other thing that it can help with is formations. So it gives you organizational ability without stopping. And believe me, I've had to do it all different ways. So I'm not saying, gee, I never do this. But you don't have to stop with if the group is small enough, if you don't have 80 kids in here, this is effective. But you don't have to stop and, okay, everybody's kind of talking, okay, now I'm going to read off this list and you're going to go there. Sometimes you have to do that. But that does mitigate that issue. If your students start to look for, oh, I wonder where we're seated today. Because one of the things that happens when COVID came is that all of my regular routines went out the window. And the reason for that was, obviously, I can't put people this close together, right, in a choral setting this semester or last semester, which is the way we handle things all the time. And in bands, too, you're really much closer together. So those of you that have been in choirs before know that oftentimes you would come into this room and I'd have the chairs in a different formation. And then we would reseat. And it isn't that, gee, I love to give myself lots of work. It's that it helped me to try out different formations for a particular piece. Then, in the context of the rehearsal, you're not spending the time that you have in the next 6 weeks before the concert. Now, gee, how am I going to have the choir seated? And you don't try that out until you get onto the stage. That is too late. So there's a lot of things that even today we've kind of set up here that you can use for the whole semester or the whole quarter on the first day. But you've done a lot of prep work that those students aren't even going to see. Number one, you've done this already. You have done all of this stuff for 4 or 5 pieces that's already in their folder. When they're here, another way that you could do this is on the chair when they arrive is the folder. So they go to their seat because they see the name, and then find your folder and take a seat, please. You could say something like that. Find your name, open your folder, and then they'll have something to do while you're getting ready. They're going to look through it and all of that. So suddenly, all your music is out to the right person. And so it's this organizational stuff that, you don't practice that for a class. You don't go out and buy music and go through all of this stuff. But it is something that is so crucial. And one of those 8 million things that you learn on the job, and you go, wow, is that important? And so, okay, so that's, all of this stuff happens before we even have our first rehearsal. And I realized, on the road and stuff, thinking about what we need to talk about. Yeah, you've all got your little scores, but how do you get them? And how does that organization happen? So I think that discussion is important to have. Brian, our librarian, keeps everything on a computer program, or eventually will. Eventually, right. And the original program, one of the librarians lost it. So this is not what to do, but I'm right in the breach of, well, what are we going to do? Uh-oh. But we had a computer program on which the entire library was organized. And then there is a master book in which every single piece we have in our library that's constantly updated is listed by title and composer, or is listed by composer first and then title, or is listed by voicing and the meaning SSA or SATB or whatever. So with all of these, whether it's an online program, like I just sent you a link, something that might be interesting for you to peruse, that is one of those rental kind of programs. You don't purchase the program and upload, they host the program. And I'm not recommending it, I'm just giving you an example of the technology that makes Excel pretty old. And so they keep records for you in this fashion, and you can download and print out the same records that I have here.
How often would you say that you download and reprint your master? Do you do
Not
that?
enough.
Okay.
Right now, because of the loss of the original file, that hasn't been done in several years. So, for instance, Brian is doing all this re-entering by hand, right? I mean, there's like handwritten stuff on here where the new music is coming. So, anyway, so in some fashion, you're going to want to store all this information, retrieve it, update it, and then not only do you have, I'm numbering every one of these, but every one of my pieces has a number, completely different from the 1 through 60. Like 222, oh, that's, somewhere over the rainbow or whatever. And every one of these, so that is the number in your computer program that is the ID for that particular, and then you file it according to that. So you have 1 through 2,000. We have thousands of individual titles, because the library we have here predates me. And one of the things that you see, like over there on that table, the reason that we are in such a state is because the Choral Library, the room that we have, is over capacity. We don't have enough storage now. So there are 2 rooms under the stage in the dungeon that have no storage cabinets. We're just kind of putting boxes in right now until there's some, capital to fix that situation. So that's the other thing. How much space do you have to store this? And where does your district store it? So all of that, I think, is worthy of discussion and of your contemplation, because Then you send it out. What do you have to do then? You have to take it in. You have to take the music back in after that particular concert is finished. Unless you're going to reuse some of the music later in the year, and then they know to keep that in there. But there's going to be that in and out process with music all year, whether you're on the quarter system or the semester one. And that in and of itself can swamp you, because we're not talking about, right here, and when Camerata is in play, I have 3 choirs that I conduct weekly that have 3 different programs. I now have a librarian for each of the groups. When you're the librarian and you have a jazz choir, a concert choir, a girls choir, maybe a guys choir, or an entry-level choir, and you go over to another building and you have something else. But let's say you have at least 5 groups, a 0-hour group, and then 4 other choirs. That is just mathematically a lot of music. So the sheer amount of in and out can be pretty overwhelming. Now, of course, the students can help you with that once there's a routine, but that has to be somewhere in your head too, as you go out and look forward to, all right, I'm going to go do this as a career, and here's one of the roles that I need to take.
So when I was in high school, I recognize this is illegal, but my choir teacher, she scanned all of the stuff and then gave it to us, so we didn't have any original copies. What is your opinion on doing something like that?
That's illegal. And it's not illegal if, in fact, I anticipated that question. One of the pieces that the chamber choir is doing right now is from the Choral Public Domain Library. And in the Choral Public Domain Library, there's a lot of classical era pieces. So if you do some classical, whether it's Renaissance, Baroque, classical, Mozart, Haydn, romantic, Brahms, contemporary, Copland, whatever. There are many of the choral pieces that those composers are put in non-edited formats, like it's just the facts, man. It's music, and there's no heavy editing on it. Rescored so that it doesn't look like maybe the Boozy and Hawks version, and they are allowed to. You're allowed to copy this as many copies as you want without any copyright. This piece, Stabat Mater by Astoria, is not in copyright. And so that's a wonderful resource for all of us. It costs money to print it out, but it's pennies on the dollar compared to if I were to buy the same piece or for all the copies of my choir needs. But anyway, that is a legal copy. There is another way to make it legal. I've given you one copy, I think, that's been Xeroxed, and I've written on there that this is for a choral methods course, and I put the date on it. We can use it for classroom, but you can't take it out and use it in a classroom setting. The other way is that there's a Fox music agency company. Some of you may have heard of that. And they grant music licenses. And in certain circumstances, multiple copies of music can be made to be uploaded into readers or tablets. And that's why I'm saying that's what kind of music is going. It's the same concept as this, but it's just for a PDF. So there are PDFs that are completely legal. But the old style where the director, and I'm going to admit I did that a couple of times when I was teaching, because there's no money in the budget. Somebody takes this and says, well, Tommy and Jane and Letitia all need one of these, and I'm going to give it to them. So you copy it out for practical purposes. That is still illegal copy. And some school districts have been shut down. Because, I mean, really, it's not like there's police out there all the time, copyright police in the bushes of income just waiting to swarm through the state. But if somebody happens to occasionally check a school, and they do that, there have been cases of hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of copyright fees or copyright penalties that school districts have had to pay. So that each state has had cases like that over the years. So the districts get real gun shy about it. One of the, this is a quick aside, but one of the solutions that Pocatello School District had was that they pooled all their choral literature, all their band literature into a central location here in the district. And so all three of the high schools, let's say their band does a Sousa march or their choir does a Victoria piece, that is kept, in their trailer location up near Highland High School, and there's the directors have keys and they go in there and they check them out, they peruse the music, they check them out, use them, put them back. So that's their way of, let's get the biggest bang for the buck that we can.
So, do you always have to use students' originals to avoid copyright laws?
I usually do, unless it's CPDL. And that's considered an original because it's copyright. There's no copyright. But the other thing that I do is that, and this is legal as well, and the reason that I know it is because I served on a board, a national board for the American Choral Directors Association for a number of years, and so we dealt with copyright quite a bit. If you have old, antiquated copies in your library, enough to cover all of your people, it is legal for you to make copies that don't exceed the number of copies you have in your choral library and use those if they're more readable and not. For instance, if we've got some old music where if you open it, it almost falls apart. You can copy those legally. If you've got 60, you can copy 60. Another way you can get around it is if you order the music and it's on order, you can copy the number as long as you put on there the date that you copied it and the date by which it's going to be destroyed or recycled. And then when that new music gets in, it's replaced, you give your singers. Or, does that answer?
Yeah, but I guess just to clarify, you're basically saying as long as you have the originals coming, or at least you have them, you
That's
can
right.
copy the number.
That's right. Why is that a huge issue? Because of money. I mean, for school districts. We're fortunate here at ISU that the bands, choirs, and orchestras have had a budget to purchase music, which is incredibly expensive. I mean, one of these pieces, this one right here just says, I can say, $2.15 for a little arrangement of America the Beautiful. You have 60 kids, do the math. How do some teachers get around it? Some of the school district teachers, they do partner singing or partner folders so that they buy half as many copies as they need and they're assigned a partner folder and they share the music. So that's the way they kind of get around it. They don't copy for everybody, they just literally make them share. So anyway, this is all really pertinent because some of you will inherit a budget where you might have $500 for the year. Wow, 2 or 3 pieces will kill that off. Not to mention if you've got, if you're the music department and you've got a pep band and you've got a swing choir or whatever it is that you have, it's a big deal. So I'm going to continue to now pepper you, not JW pepper you, or but I guess it is more like this. I'm going to pepper you with some more links and some things that hopefully you'll collect and look at and say, oh, that's a sight reading program, that's a good one. Things like that are more kind of how do I use these resources in my program. Many of you are student members of NAFTA. And how many of you belong to NAFMA? Okay, not as many as I thought. But for your membership, you can opt to get the hard copy monthly magazine or online. And you can, in these magazines, this is the Music Educators Journal, and I've just circled some articles for example. Here's one. Link to the Library of Congress, John Henry. What can we learn from different historical versions of a popular folk song? It's interesting. I read that article. Here's another one. Popular music education, a call to action. Engaging with popular music from a cultural standpoint, a concept-oriented framework. In other words, what's the role of popular music in our curriculum? Interesting. So, and most of you, I know, don't belong as student members to the American Choral Directors Association, ACDA. We got a chapter together a couple of years ago and kind of let it go. How many of you were student members at one time? We have a few of you that were. And this is the version of American Choral Directors Association's journal that is just like this. But why this is important and could be a lifeline for all of you is it is entirely about choirs. It's entirely about, it's like if you belong to CBDNA, the college band program, if you belong to the National Association of Jazz Music Educators. It's just a specific kind of a discipline. And, for example, coordinating vocal colors in women's choruses, a guide to improving student-led section rehearsals. That's what 2 articles are about in here. So it's very specific to the choral world. And here's another one, Voices of Youth, Joy of Singing with Children's Choir. Oh, what's in there?
Well, a coffee.
Anita will be pleased. You need to get some napkins. I think you do.
Actually, I think I'm okay. I have a wet wipe still.
Do you? But there's a whole bunch of stuff underneath.
Yeah,
A lot.
there's a lot.
There you go. Anita! I tell you, yeah. And then one is All the Worlds of Musical Stage, Theatrical Elements in Choir Concerts. Here's another one. Technology in the Choral Art, New Technologies for the Choral Musician, Inspiration and Communication. Here's another one. On the Voice, the Choral Journal has several, columns each month. One is vocal technique. How do you use the voice in the choral rehearsal? Very useful for beginning teachers. Rehearsal break, the impact of risers on learning and performance. That's interesting. Middle school, junior high music, classifying adolescent male voices.
Oh.
You're gonna want that. But see, this is why I really promote, if you end up, and it's not something like, hey, I know I'm gonna be teaching band for the next 2 decades in, at Timberline High School, then you're not gonna have any choirs, probably. But if you are in a choral setting, this group can be, this organization, the Idaho version of the American Choral Directors Association, can be your lifeline to just renewal, ideas, techniques, and resources. And for both of these groups, NAFMA and ACDA, there are websites that have all sorts of resources that you can link up with, whether they be sight reading or literature. Literature is going to be how you build your program. Literature is going to be, think about yourself as a instrumental or vocal musician. How do you grow? You grow through your literature. I mean, what you can play now is not what you could play 10 years ago. And how does that literature, that's the same thing with your choirs. So, I've got about, I don't know, 20 or 25 of these laying around. I'm going to force the issue by asking each of you to take one of them and read one article. I just think that all you need to do is get hooked and say, okay, this is what I can get out of this. As a teacher, as a musician, and particularly as a choral music educator. So, what do we want to do for the next few class periods? I mean, this is one issue, and I'm going to bring up other ones that are behind the scenes. I'm going to take you on a little field trip around in here, and we're going to look at old set of folding Wenger choral risers, and you're going to have to learn how to use them. Meaning, how do I unfold them? How do I set them up? That kind of practical stuff. So, back to now presenting this stuff to our students, meaning singing, meaning the music that we use to teach singing. What I'd like to put into action with you and have as a discussion of the next 4 or 5 classes are these elements. And you all know that we all have different learning cues, right? Some of us are really responsive to the visual, some of us are really responsive to the oral, some of us are real cognitive oriented, like the way we process things comes in with, left brain. Some of us are really kinesthetic and or tactile, meaning we move, we touch, we retain. I'm that way. If I can do something, I can remember it. If I just hear it cognitively, it doesn't always work for me. And then affective learning is if we are out in the middle of a field and it is the dead of winter and all you can see is flat, snow-covered field, and you look way across that field, it might be 50 miles, and you see the beginnings of a hill or a mountain. And that atmosphere that I'm trying to set up with you immediately brings us into some sort of commonality. Our shared experiences, we've all been to the side of the Grand Canyon, or we haven't, we've been on the edge of a mountain. We've all been outside in the cold, cold weather. We've all been in a hardly 100-degree, maybe even some humid weather. Those kinds of things that are imagery oriented, that are conceptual but experiential based, we can use to do so many things. Unify a sensation, affect involuntary muscle. So if we come up with an image, and I'm going to illustrate this starting on Thursday with you. Imagery then can make some of the vocal muscles tense, or it can make them function in a more relaxed and open way, and can assist us in making more beautiful sound, or it can hinder us. It can make us all tense. So it's the use of all of these things in combination that make the best teaching. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
That if we're going to get to the most students in any of our classes, we're going to try to hook our students. Think about ourselves. I think about myself. If I come into some sort of experience that involves all those things, I will probably leave having remembered a great deal. If I come into an experience with this, for me, I'm going to be, yeah, that's interesting, I'm going to write that down, and then after a while, it's like, Anderson, So that's where we're going. I'd like you to bring your 3 pieces with you. You'll be in a different formation on Thursday, and I'll just use the same process. So lastly, I think I'm going to leave you with the kind of preparation that we're talking about here is significant. And I know some of my own choral students now here at ISU, they laugh at the fact that I have to place my own chairs, and I don't want help. That all came from my high school days when I had like 5 minutes to set everything up the way I thought that I needed to be for that next class, because you know how it is with preps. You don't have an hour, you have 5 minutes. And then I just kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it. And it becomes just like the names that you see here and when you came in and the way you feel. I feel like I'm caring for something when I put the chairs out, or it's a weird kind of a connection. But the preparation is so significant that that's what so many aspiring teachers maybe don't realize or aren't prepared to do. It's like, if you've got a 7 a.m. class, you're not getting there at 6:50. You're getting there at 5:30. I get here at 7 for this class. And I mean, I know the stuff, but there's just significant issues that for myself, I need to be prepared to make the experience reasonable. So, still there? Okay. So we'll see you on Thursday. Just bring your music, and I'm going to try to make this a living document. Meaning, if I make reference to it, it's going to be through some of the activities that we do. Okay. You received rehearsal videos, and those of you beg your indulgence from last semester because they're the same ones that I used, but now you're evaluating them based on their process, on the rehearsal, not the gesture and the conducting. You can make reference to the conducting, but the big deal is how is that director rehearsing their choir? And just answer when I send it to you, answer the form, okay?